What's up, everybody? Matt Maran here for another weekly update. So, lots of interesting stuff to go over this week. The first is a bunch of different Subaru concepts that they're going to be showing at the Tokyo Motor Show here in October. And so, we'll just go right through them here. The first one is what is most likely a WRX preview. It's officially called the Subaru Viziv Performance Concept, but Subaru describes it as a sports sedan that combines enjoyment and peace of mind. They say that has the eyesight system and a more advanced version of the eyesight tech to have advanced driver assistance, and that's like something they're all excited about. But if this is a WRX preview, then this is mostly supposed to preview the styling for the new WRX. And we can see just, there's the two shadowy images we have here. One of the front where you can clearly see a hood scoop and, some evolutionary headlights, that kind of expand on the look of the current one. And then in the back there, a little bit swoopier proportions, similar to the old WRX concept that we saw a few years ago, and that turned out to not be quite as radical in production as it was for that concept. So, don't get too excited by these images. It's still very much a concept car, and we'll have to wait and see what actually comes out for production. But cool to see that first. And then some actual production stuff. These are Japan-only models. Japan's getting the S208 WRX STI. They've done these S207, 206, on and on for many years now. They're only making 450 of these for Japan. They have the carbon fiber roof, so kind of like the Type RA STI that we are getting here in the States. No horsepower numbers were given for this, but the previous S207 version had 323 horsepower and 318 pound-feet of torque, so maybe give or take a few more from that. But anyway, cool to see that. Also, there's the Japan-only BRZ STI Sport. Sport is the key word here, not a full-on STI, of course. And, of course, in typical BRZ fashion, there's no more power. But they said they improved the ride and handling, because the one thing the BRZ didn't need was a better ride and handling, but they continue to improve it with every single special edition. Better ride, better handling, better ride, better brakes, better handling. No one cares about this stuff. Everyone wants the engine, and there's no more power. Anyway, I'm going to cut that tangent short. And so anyway, it's also coming in this exclusive color called Cool Gray Khaki. They're only making 100 of them, and only for Japan. I'm not too upset about that one. And then there's also the XV Fun Adventure concept, which is basically an XV Crosstrek that has a little bit of a higher ride height, some off-road tires, a little rack on the top of the roof there, and looks cool. There's also the Impreza Future Sport concept, which is a little bit lower, a little bit sportier, but again, no additional power. Just has a cooler center exhaust exit there, and just a little bit more of a sportier look to it, and probably sportier handling with a lower center of gravity. But that's about it for that. So, cool stuff nonetheless, and hopefully we get some really great looks of that Viziv Performance concept, and it does actually turn out to look that good for the next gen WRX and WRX STI. Now on to some spy shots here. A bunch of Porsche news this week. First is the 2019 Porsche 911 interior was spied for the first time. We got a really good shot. There was some engineer who was caught off guard, and a spy photographer caught him before he was able to flip down those flaps and cover up the dashboard there. And so what we see is only an analog tachometer, and then all the rest of the gauges are digital, and then you have in the center there a really large infotainment screen, very similar to what we're seeing in the new Panamera. It looks very futuristic. Now, the engineer's laptop was covering the rest of the center there, but it's most likely going to be very similar to a Panamera with the capacitive touch buttons, and very futuristic looking. And I really like it. I think actually the way that infotainment screen set up with those little ridges running at the top and the bottom of it to kind of frame it in there kind of reminds me a lot of like the 993 and earlier Porsches. That was always the typical design thing, is it had those like a little area that like a row that was just running across, and so I kind of like that they're kind of doing that again here and doing a little throwback. So cool to see that. Other Porsche news is the 718 Cayman and Boxster GTS were spied testing on the Nürburgring. Now, we knew GTS models of both were coming, but I didn't realize how soon they were actually coming. So it's going to probably have about 375 horsepower from the 2.5-liter turbo motor that's in the S models of those currently. But they're saying AutoGuide's reporting that they think it's going to debut at the LA Auto Show in November, so just 2 months away here, really. And so cool to see that being worked on. Porsche officially debuted the Panamera Turbo S E-Hybrid Sport Turismo, which is a mouthful. Basically, this is just the wagon version of the, Turbo S E-Hybrid that they already debuted. And so we've already seen the Sport Turismo body style for the standard Panameras, and it's very beautiful, very cool. And so now we have it here for the E-Hybrid version. So it has the same powertrain as the non-Sport Turismo version, which is that 4-liter twin-turbo V8 engine, and it has an electric motor to go along with it. And so it's the same combined horsepower of 680 horsepower, 626 pound-feet of torque, 3.2 seconds 0 to 60, 192 mile per hour top speed. And of course, it has all the Porsche tech for safety, and with this e-hybrid, it can run on electric mode or hybrid or whatever it is you want it to do. Since it's so chock full of technology, you can imagine the price is very high, and that is correct. It is $189,450 for its starting price. So realistically, these are all going to be over $200,000, and they're going to be starting deliveries of these in the spring of 2018. So it does look very cool there, and very futuristic. Kind of give you a little bit of a preview of just a little bit of the performance you can expect from the Mission E that's going to be fully electric here in a couple of years. Speaking of that powertrain, though, it's actually going to be showing up in another Volkswagen Group product. The next Audi RS7 is actually also going to be, according to Auto Guide, debuting at the LA Auto Show in just 2 months, a brand new RS7. And anyway, Evo magazine is reporting that they had a recent conversation with Audi's head of design, and he said that the next RS7 will get 2 different options. So you can either do a non-hybrid twin-turbo V8 engine that does 650 horsepower, 600 pound-feet of torque. That's kind of the same as a lot of these other Volkswagen Group products. That motor is also going to end up in the new Bentley Continental GT in a V8 version, for those who don't want the W12 and that. But then there will be a hybrid version of the RS7 that's going to have around 700 horsepower, according to him. Will be very impressive performance-wise. So it's good they're giving people the option. If you want the hybrid stuff and all the extra weight that goes along with that, you can have your extra, 50 horsepower or whatever it ends up being. If you want the non-hybrid version, you still got 650 horsepower, which is going to be wild. Very interesting to hear about that. Another sports sedan we actually got official pricing for this week is the Kia Stinger and Stinger GT. They announced all the pricing for them here. It starts at $32,795, which is a really good starting price, and that's with the 255 horsepower, 260 pound-feet of torque, turbo 4-cylinder, 2-liter motor. If you want all-wheel drive in any of the Stingers, it's $2,200 extra. That's pretty. If you consider an all-wheel drive version of that, at starting now, they didn't really get too detailed as far as what you get on a base trim Stinger, but I'm sure it'll be fairly nicely equipped still. And at $35,000, you're with all-wheel drive, you're at the same price as like a WRX Limited, coming in at the price of something along those lines, which has very similar horsepower, and this is even a little bit longer, probably a little bit more comfortable and luxurious. Could actually kind of give the WRX a run for its money, even in that base trim. And then, of course, you can have, there's different packages. There's a premium package with LED lights, sunroof, power seats, navigation, a better sound system. That's $38,000. And then you add all-wheel drive. That's a $40,000 car. But again, still, not bad. And then there's also the Stinger GT, of course, with the 3.3-liter twin-turbo V6, same motor as on the Genesis G80 Sport that I just reviewed a couple weeks ago. And 365 horsepower, and that starts at just under $40,000, $39,895. And that maxes out fully loaded at $50,395, and they'll be arriving in dealerships here in just a few weeks. But before everyone freaks out, a lot of people online were like, $50,000 for a Kia, rah! And it's like, it's not that bad. You consider, like I said, under $40,000 starting, and you're getting 365 horsepower. The Focus RS everyone loves with all-wheel drive, that's 350 horsepower, and they've had their fair share of issues with those as well, but that's another side point. But anyway, so you get 15 extra horsepower for the same price as a Focus RS, and even in base trim, a Kia Stinger GT will probably be nicer inside than a Focus RS, even in the nicer trims of those. So I can see this thing almost being like a Focus RS fighter in some ways. I mean, yes, they say these are, have a softer suspension setup. It's not going to attack a track like a Focus RS, but for a daily driver, for 95% of what most people do for driving, I think the Stinger might actually be a nicer option. Just my personal opinion on that. But anyway, very competitive pricing, I think, honestly. And so overall, very exciting, and I can't wait to hopefully start seeing these things on the streets and people buying them up fairly quickly. Another interesting vehicle that was officially announced this past week was the 2018 Mitsubishi Outlander PHEV, which is coming to the United States. Apparently, these were a huge hit in Europe. They're like the #1 selling plug-in hybrid in Europe. So now we're getting it here in the States. It's plug-in hybrid version of the Outlander we already know. And so we're going to be getting it at the end of this year. It's got a 2-liter 4-cylinder engine and then two 60-kilowatt electric motors, one on each axle, so it has all-wheel drive. And so 195 horsepower total for these. It's got a 12 kilowatt hour lithium ion battery pack, so not a ton of range, on purely electric, but it does have some range there. It can be charged, with a plug or with regenerative braking. And then there's, of course, you can charge it with the engine itself, and there's like a range extender version, so you can go on fully electric power, but just use the engine as a range extender, kind of like a Chevy Volt or something like that. So there's a bunch of different driving modes if you want max performance and all that kind of stuff. But again, this is not a performance SUV by any means. And anyway, it's going to be pretty cool. I mean, I just recently drove the Volvo XC60 T8 as one of the cars for the Evo Awards that you just saw, with the McLaren this past week. And I'll have a review of the Volvo XC60 T8 coming here in a few weeks. And so it was really cool there to have the different modes. And those electric motors really give you a lot of low-end punch. And it's pretty fun in a different and unique way. Anyway, the Mitsubishi Outlander PHEV is going to be starting at $35,535, which is kind of high. We'll have to wait and see what kind of equipment they actually put on. If it's like a fully loaded Outlander, then that's not too bad. But if that's like a bare bones one and that's just the starting, then, it might be kind of steep. But that's the price you pay for this, hybrid and electric technology. It's expensive. And so anyway, interesting to see that. And there's some interesting stories here about Jaguar this past week. The first is there was some recent F-Type spy shots that show an F-Type running around with some interesting badging on the back. So it's looking like Jag's going to be like the other car companies that are changing their trim levels and the names for the trim levels in order to fall in line with horsepower outputs instead of displacement. Because it used to be, all these model designations for all the European cars were based on, how much displacement the engine had. But now with electric stuff and downsizing, it doesn't sound very attractive to have a downsized motor that has, a smaller number than the model you're replacing. So they're all going to, just things that are irrelevant, or like in Audi's case, they're trying to realign with horsepower, and Jag's doing the same thing. So they're saying like for this F-Type, like an F-Type S would instead have an F-Type P380 badge on the back. P stands for petrol, gas, of course, and then 380 for how much horsepower it has. And then like the base model F-Type would be the P300. And so that's how it would kind of go on for that. And then if there's like an electric or a hybrid version, like for the I-Pace or something like that, that would be like an E400 or however much horsepower it has. And so that's kind of how they're going to be doing that, it sounds like, which is fine. It's just badging, and it actually makes sense. So I actually prefer this over the stuff that Audi and a few of the others have proposed as far as their renaming conventions. But anyway, speaking of the F-Type, though, Automotive News spoke to Ian Callum, who's the Jaguar design chief, and he said that a next-gen F-Type will be developed, or he wants to do a next-generation sports car. He didn't call it an F-Type. Maybe it'd be some other model. I hope they just continue on with the F-Type because I think it's a great name and, has a little bit of a history to it now. Anyway, he said, his quote here is, "We are going to do another range of sports cars eventually. There are a number of people in the world who think sports cars are finished because SUVs can get around a corner as quick as a sports car can, technology being what it is. But there is something very emotional about a sports car that conveys the ultimate in the sense of performance and design." So the good news is, they're going to continue making sports cars. The F-Type wasn't just a flash in the pan and then they're done with them and they're just going to crossovers or anything. They're going to keep doing sports cars, which is awesome because that's what Jag started out doing. And so very, exciting to hear that. The only thing is, he's saying this is going to be in the future. And so we know in the past, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, Jag announced that any new model after 2020 that's introduced is going to be electrified in some way, whether that's a mild hybrid, which is just like a higher voltage electrical system that can actually power the car, or a full hybrid system, or a fully electric car. One of those three is what the next Jag sports car is going to have. So, I don't know. I just really hope it's not fully electric. I could probably deal with some type of hybrid setup, or a mild hybrid would be fine, of course. But fully electric would be kind of sad considering Jags always sounds so good. So we'll have to wait and see what they end up doing here. The good news is they're doing a sports car, but we'll just have to wait and see how it turns out. In the meantime, the F-Type is still a fantastic choice. Other electric sports car news here. Infiniti, actually, their chief of design confirmed to Autocar that they're going to be showing a new electric vehicle at the Detroit Auto Show in January. And he says it's going to be an all-new model that's based on it's not going to be based on any existing products. It's a completely new ground-up thing. So I don't think this is any new variant of the Q60, even though that was rumored they were going to do a hybrid version of that or something. But he said it's going to incorporate parts of the Prototype 9 EV concept, which is, that weird thing they showed at Pebble Beach just recently that was, a very cool looking, vintage inspired racer. It looked straight out of, like the early 40s there, and was cool, but, it was just kind of like a head scratcher. Why is Infiniti doing this? And I think, they wanted to use it as a test bed maybe for some electric technology they're planning to put in whatever it is they're working on here that they'll be showing at Detroit. But anyway, they came out with a cool supercar concept several years ago actually, but that was mostly just to show off the new styling for what we now see in the Q60 and whatnot. So we'll have to see, if they do another type of supercar, if that's something they really actually want to do, or if this is just, they said it's high performance, I guess, is, what everyone's thinking it's going to be, but how high performance or, whether it's an SUV or what, who knows. But anyway, interesting to hear that. Some really head-scratching spy shots this past week was that a narrow-body Dodge Demon was spied running around. And they know it's a Demon because they even got an interior shot of the guy got stuck in the drive-thru or something, and he had the screen up that even showed 808 horsepower there. It was enabled with his red key. So definitely a Demon, and it's definitely running around with a narrow body on it. And the Demons are only wide body, and even the Hellcats now have the wide body and stuff. So why they're doing a narrow one makes no sense. They also, Dodge specifically said that they're only doing 3,000 Demons, and then they're done with it. So I don't know if they're just like, well, we'll call this something new. We did hear about the trademark Angel that was trademarked recently, but I highly doubt calling it a Dodge Angel just because it's a narrower Demon. Doesn't seem to make sense. So I don't know what Dodge is up to, but the exciting thing is they release stuff fairly quickly, and they always seem to have something new and exciting up their sleeve. So I have faith in them that whatever it is, it's going to be awesome. But anyway, interesting to see that for sure. Some other stuff that was spied this past week. BMW was spy testing a 2 Series Gran Coupe, and it's still a fairly rough mule. It doesn't have production headlights, taillights, grille, any of that kind of stuff. But this is what's going to be competing with the Mercedes CLA and the Audi A3. And it might be front-wheel drive because the 2 Series, a lot of the variants of the 2 Series in Europe are front-wheel drive, aside from the Coupe. And so this Gran Coupe, which is essentially just a sedan, that's going to probably be front-wheel drive, most likely all-wheel drive in most of its variants, much like the Audi A3 is, and the CLA. But anyway, they said there could be an M2 version of this as well, and that would probably have all-wheel drive, maybe rear-wheel drive, but I don't know. That car doesn't look like it's really got a rear-wheel drive basis under it, but who knows. Anyway, cool to hear about that. Another BMW that was spied was the 7 Series. They just came out with the 7 Series not too long ago, but it looks like a refresh is already up their sleeve. It's going to just obviously freshen up the headlights, the bumpers, and the rear taillights there. And I'm sure that's going to have lots of new technology inside as well. And so anyway, interesting to see that spied. A couple of spy shots sent in by some of you, actually a couple of weeks ago here, I'm just now getting to it, is Guard in Texas. He's sent in some pictures of a Range Rover Sport in an airport getting loaded on, and it had camo on the front of it, and nothing on the back. It was just camouflage from the front fenders and the front end. And then Jonathan also spied some Range Rover Evoques in Las Vegas that had the same camo treatment of on the fenders and on the front bumper, or front end, and that's it. So it sounds like both these cars are getting a front end refresh is obviously the logical deduction from that. But, it makes sense for the Range Rover Sport, but for the Evoque, that's a dated car at this point. I was expecting them to do an all-new one, not refresh it yet again. But it's interesting, it's undeniable. It's clearly what it is a refresh. Otherwise, the whole car would be camouflaged and would look different than a standard Evoque. But anyway, very cool to see that, and thank you guys for sending those in. It's very awesome to see. Some other interesting news this week. So a couple of head-scratching stories this past week. James Dyson, who does the Dyson vacuum cleaners, announced that he's going to have an electric car that he's going to have on the market. He's going to be launching it in 2020. And so, yeah, apparently he says he has 400 people working on it, and he's actively recruiting other people to help him with building this car. And that's really, I mean, just over 2 years away, 2020, for having something on the market. So I guess it's fairly far along. It's going to be interesting to see what kind of styling he does, considering their, appliances are so bold looking and stuff. It's just everyone seems to be running to making an electric car. And I mean, Dyson, they're pretty cool and futuristic. So, maybe he thinks he can give Tesla a good run for his money. Who knows? The 2020s are shaping up to be really wild with all these cars and technologies and things. It's going to be pretty crazy. So anyway, interesting to hear that. Hyundai this past week, what's been over the past few weeks, there's been rumors, especially in the Korean press, about Hyundai supposedly being interested in buying Fiat Chrysler. And Fiat Chrysler's been trying to find someone to buy them. They almost were sold to a Chinese company, and it didn't work out. And they wanted, I think, even GM to merge with them and all this kind of stuff. And so, yeah, they're just looking for a buyer, very clearly, it seems. And so anyway, the newest rumor is that Hyundai is the one that's considering buying them, and Hyundai denies that they're pursuing anything officially, but they're saying that if it did happen, they would actually end up, if Hyundai and Kia combined with Fiat Chrysler, they would actually be the largest automaker based on annual sales. They beat Volkswagen, Ford, GM, all those, and be a really huge force to be reckoned with. So we'll have to wait and see if that actually pans out. Would lead to a lot of very interesting things, as far as how vehicles would pan out and whatnot. But yeah, very interesting to hear that. The Hyundai Kona already looks so much like a Grand Cherokee, or like the standard Jeep Cherokee. That's really a match made in heaven. Those two cars could be sold right alongside each other, and no one really know the difference, at least in my opinion, in the front. So yeah, but anyway, interesting to hear that. And the last story this week is McLaren has shown off 4 official spy photos of the BP23, which is their successor to the McLaren F1. And if that looks a lot like a 720S, that's because it is. They're using that as just a mule to test this car. I'm assuming the BP23 is going to have fairly unique styling, although I'm surprised they didn't widen the 720S to fit the 3 seats that they supposedly want to have. I mean, you can see the test engineer clearly sitting in the middle, and they say they're testing screens for side mirrors, and camera side mirrors instead of the traditional type. Yeah, they just are saying it's going to be the fastest McLaren ever, but not in lap times. So everyone's saying, well, then that must mean either 0 to 60 or top speed or both. And we know the McLaren F1 had a top speed of 240 miles per hour way back in the 90s, and so maybe they're trying to beat that and have this be like some kind of Chiron competitor, something like that. They said that this is supposed to be more of a grand tour and not be a handling beast, but it should be able to carry 3 people comfortably. So we'll see about that comfortably part, because if it's in a 720S, I feel like there's not going to be enough room for 3 people to comfortably sit. This car is going to be debuting in a couple of years. They actually said that there's going to be a P15 hypercar that's actually going to debut before then, and then this will be a couple years down the road, and so it's going to take them a while to really develop it and make it a proper F1 successor. But anyway, very exciting to see them working on that, and cool of them to show off a couple pictures of the mule as well. But yeah, so that's it for all the news this week, guys. So let me know all your thoughts about everything in the comments below. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care.